Well, let's talk about Bill Gates, my friends, because more questions about how and why governments want to track you. So Bill Gates and the European Union, their goal is to basically track you, right? Follow you, every movement. We heard at the World Economic Forum a few months ago, of course, we heard from different companies saying, we want to be able to put carbon footprint trackers in everything that you do. It'll be your own sort of quantified life. You know, as much as I like tagging what I'm reading on Goodreads and updating my book reading progress, because I like to just keep, track of my own progress, I don't want the governments knowing that, oh, he traveled to this spot, to that spot, and he's got a certain number of carbon tracking points. And guess what? So that means Clayton is not allowed to travel next year because he traveled too much this year. And we have that all tracked. We have it in our database. We know exactly what you're doing, where you're going, and how much carbon you're using. And it's coming. They're already doing this.
I'm pretty sure the government already knows all of that stuff, where you've been, but they just don't limit that kind of thing. But yeah, the question about how and why governments want to track you. This is a story, again, that involves Bill Gates and the European Union, because this week, the head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, said this about how you can't trust websites to track you. So you know what? You should let the government do it for you.
Jedes Mal, wenn eine Website uns auffordert, eine neue digitale Identität zu erstellen oder uns bequem über eine große Plattform anzumelden, haben wir in Wirklichkeit keine Ahnung, was eigentlich mit unseren Daten passiert. Und aus diesem Grund wird die Kommission demnächst eine sichere europäische digitale Identität vorschlagen. Eine, der wir vertrauen und die Bürgerinnen und Bürger überall in Europa nutzen können, um alles zu tun.
So she's saying we're going to create a European digital ID. This is for our friend in Melbourne, Australia, who said, could you read us when we have a foreign language? A technology where we can control ourselves when data and how data is used. Now we can use this under the European Union guidelines. So European Union, we won't allow websites to do it, but we are going to do it for you.
She said even, when you check in for a flight or rent a bike, right? It's just right there. Just scan and we know exactly who you are. This was announced earlier this week, just as COVID passports were sort of being phased, or earlier this year, I'm sorry, just as COVID passports were being phased out in the European Union. And they're saying that this is something to make it easier for you to move around the world and move around the web and authenticate yourself. These are the use cases they give us. And maybe we wouldn't mind so much if we had not just used COVID passports here in Europe with, we're learning, no real reason for having to have done that. This was proven this week when Rob Roos, a politician from the Netherlands, who is also a member of the European Parliament, asked this simple question of Pfizer's president of international markets.
Antisocial. This is what the Dutch Prime Minister and Health Minister told us. You don't get vaccinated just for yourself, but also for others. You do it for all of society. That's what I said. Today, this turned out to be complete nonsense. In a COVID hearing in the European Parliament, one of the Pfizer directors just admitted to me, at the time of introduction, the vaccine had never been tested on stopping the transmission of the virus. This removes the entire legal basis for the COVID passport. The COVID passport that led to massive institutional discrimination as people lost access to essential parts of society. I find this to be shocking, even criminal. Please watch the video until the end.
Yeah.
So he asks her, did you test whether or not the vaccine would prevent the spread? And she said that was never tested. But Europeans went along with a COVID passport, which authenticated them around the world to get on airplanes, to get in restaurants, to get into any movies. And they still don't know why they did that, right? And so now...
The whole argument, of course, was... Well, Apple rolled out their whatever contract. Apple, Google partnered up to come up with their contact tracing thing that was good. Remember that?
Right.
So, okay, if you were in close proximity to someone, then you would get an alert, let them know. Like we had to get a negative test to go into Disneyland, whatever, and then they would send you an alert later in the day. Like you were near somebody that had COVID, so you might as well go get tested.
Yes.
Right? Based on your tracking. We're watching every move you make, every breath you take.
Right. We went to France in June of 2021, and we had to scan ourselves into restaurants. And then they were able to track which restaurants we had been to.
Right.
And they said it's so we can contact you if there's a positive case in and around where you scanned in. But they never, I'm sure we were around plenty of COVID, and that they continued to track. So how are we supposed to get excited about another form of digital ID after we've just been through this, those of us who live in Europe?
I want to mention something too that really kind of chaps my ass, is the fact that we were suspended for saying that it didn't stop it, but the video of Rachel Maddow saying that it absolutely does stop it is still up.
Yes.
Oh yeah. And I know Russell Brand did a whole, of course he was suspended for doing the same thing. And then he was calling this out. Like, how is this not misinformation? How is this thing not up there publicly over and over and over again?
Yes. And, I realized that was the sentiment of the day, but where was the science behind what she was sharing if we now know that that was never tested? At least we know that the people behind it, we might feel a little better if we knew that the people behind these efforts weren't so stinking condescending about it. Bill Gates is increasing his investment in digital IDs, and he was asked about it recently, and all he did was poke jokes as if, like, the world knows I'm too busy for this. I would never do it, and it's preposterous. Ha, ha, ha. Listen to this.
Thanks, Bill. So my first question, I think, has to be for Bill here. And because of the intro, I'm dying to know, why did you put microchips in our vaccines? And what was the coolest thing you saw when you tracked all of us? The real question, what was different from your experience about misinformation in the past 2 years? I mean, you've been a target, obviously, of something like this before. Is it more of the same, or have the last 2 years had a markedly different experience?
No, the pandemic was completely unexpected. I mean, literally, most days during the pandemic, 90% of the messages, millions of them, that had anything to do with me, were about how maybe vaccines were a plot, this whole tracking thing. Why do I want to track you? I don't know, Do I have time to track all these people? And
I'm really interested.
Yeah, no, right. I could tell you a lot about yourself.
Can you just pause for a second?
Yeah.
Because it's as if we don't understand how Windows and many Microsoft products collect user information for profit.
Right.
As if, why would I even want to do that? Yes, I've made a ton of money collecting user data and exploiting that for profit. Right. But I wouldn't otherwise want your personal data, except your digital data, but not your body data.
Right.
Right. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And someone should push him and say, because there's a lot of money in figuring out what people do and how to advertise to them, and also how to, give and take resources. Yes, that's not a joke.
And you're too busy too. You're so busy.
You're retired. You're a philanthropist. So right. None of that tracks, and it's just so obnoxious.
Yeah.
So, in a way it was so strange, it was almost funny. But then, I'd go out in the street and people would yell at me for putting chips in them. And, things were written about, these vaccines were actually to kill people instead of to save their lives. So I'd say the biggest tragedy is that it fragmented society, where certain sources, if they told you to wear a mask, that was the last thing you were going to do. Or they told you, to get the vaccine, particularly to protect, reduce transmission to elderly people, they didn't comply. And so it is a phenomena that held us back and hurt us in a pretty dramatic way.
Now, this was just a few weeks ago in September. Mm-hmm. By the time he's saying this, he knows that the protect grandma narrative no longer holds water. None of us should be saying that because we know better. So a more appropriate and humble and honest answer out of him would be, well, people were led to believe things about COVID that turned out to be different than they were initially told, and they were punished for not having the freedom to make individual choices. So maybe if we ever want people to trust us again, we have to take individual freedom more seriously. And freedom of speech. But he doesn't say that. He condescends instead, which makes it so hard to give him the benefit of the doubt when we see things like this. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has announced $200 million investment in digital ID research to help expand infrastructure that low and middle income countries can use to become more resilient to crises such as food shortages, public health threats, and climate change, as well as to add in pandemic and economic recovery. The infrastructure encompasses tools such as interoperable payment systems. Yeah, there's profit in that. Digital ID, digital sharing systems, and civil registry databases. That's the one I like the sound of the least. Civil register, like what are we registering? Whether we're vaccinated or not, or our political opinions, or
everything. Everything.
Certainly not our genders. We don't have to do that anymore, but there's a lot of things that I really don't like here. And it's hard to, like I said, give him the benefit of the doubt when he won't give us a straight answer. And it's a moving target. And he's still continuing to say this, like, well, you know, people needed to get vaccinated for this reason. We will start
Go ahead. Sorry. I just want to say really quick, like I did a video in August, and if you guys are locals members, like a VIP, you can watch it. If you're not, I highly recommend you to do it because it's a video from 2005 where Bill Gates was basically laying out the exact scenario we just went through the past couple years. So I highly recommend you go check that out because it's like pretty shocking, but you have to be a VIP over at redacted.inc to watch it.
And also back, you know, we knew that in Jackson Hole and ahead of time, they were already actively planning and talking about the pandemic. So this idea that we didn't know about it and Dr. Fauci warned about it and we knew that there was going to be a pandemic. So this idea that it was like just came out of nowhere. We had no planning. You wrote books about it, for crying out loud, about what was coming. So no one knew about it. It's such a load. It's such a big pile of garbage.
And I didn't have time to.
And that's the thing. Like when you
go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, when you have them, when you discredit one thing they say, it should discredit everything they're saying, because that's like, if they're going to lie about that one thing, like such an obvious thing, then the rest of it has to not be true as well. You know what I mean? Like.
Well, he even said recently, we played it on the show within the last 6 months, that we knew early that the vaccine did not prevent transmission, and we didn't tell people soon enough. We played it here. So why is he now going back to this protect grandma narrative? And I don't know, maybe because it seems to make him so benevolent, but it doesn't come off that way. I do want to mention the European Union is going to start using biometrics and bio ID for border crossings, mostly on British people, because it used to be that there were no passport checks between the UK and the rest of Europe, but that ended with Brexit. And it has frustrated a lot of people who try to travel between Europe and the UK. So now the EU is going to instate this entry-exit system that will require fingerprints and Face ID checks. It's not too much different than global entry, what the United States has, except that it will also be used at road borders, which some people are confused about, because if there's like a car full of people, are you going to pass the iPad through, and have them each do fingerprints and that kind of thing? They're not quite sure how to use it at the French border, but maybe Bill Gates has some solution for that. Maybe he can put some kind of tracker in your car that can,
Are there going to be guards standing at these places, the guards with the gates that come down?
Yeah, there already are. These are at places where they already are. And I guess, since Brexit happened, these people who are used to just going in between the UK and other European countries are having problems. So we'll see how that works and whether or not that goes along with this EU plan to authenticate you into one singular digital ID.
Yeah, $200 million invested in this. And I just still can't wrap my head around. I'm just still struggling to understand the benefits that they see to invest that kind of money. I mean, other than the enormous rewards that would come from that infrastructure and that technological infrastructure on the back end, to build the infrastructure, the big data registry, to do the bioauthentication scanners or whatever else. I mean, we just saw that at what store was it? I think it was Amazon. Where was it? The store you could walk in and now they're scanning your handprint in order to make your purchase.
Yeah.
So they're doing bioauthentication just by scanning your handprint by walking in. So, there you go.
All right. Well, that's your update on the people that want to track you, and you can think about whether or not you are for or against that.